Welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is Mike Holly. Mike, welcome.
Hey, welcome, Don. How's it going, mate? It's Friday night. The sun's out, and it's 29 minutes past 7. And I'm on a podcast with you, which is good because I've usually sat down staring at four walls. Feels like I'm in a prison. And I've just had a chat to you just before we press record, mate. We've got a beer in our hands, so it feels like we're out, but not out.
Yeah, exactly. It's as good as it gets, isn't it, in these times?
What beer have you got, Dom? I didn't ask.
I've gone for a Cobra. It was in the freezer as well, so the bottle is cold to touch. And you?
Oh, what have I got? I've got, this is a swear word for a carp fishing podcast, mate. I've got otter ale.
Oh.
Not made out of pressed otters, I must add.
No.
I wish it was. I wish it was like 50 otters for one beer, pressed slowly into a beer.
Is it any good?
Yeah,
More to the
I
point?
like an otter ale. Do you know what? I don't know about you, mate. We've had a few chats, haven't we, in the past about ale.
Yeah.
As I've got older, I don't know, my taste buds have so changed. I think in my 20s, maybe up to about 30 years old, if you said to me, do you want an ale? I'd be like, you're bloody joking, aren't you? But I don't know what happened, mate. It was like the film Big, you know, when one day I woke up and I wanted to wear my dad's clothes, drink out, and
complain about everything.
Yeah, complain about everything. And you know what I also found a love for when I was about 30?
Yeah.
Olives.
Yeah, exactly the same. It's got to be a taste bud thing. Yeah, same as that. I think there was, I read or heard something about, obviously, like people that like sprouts and people that don't. It's something to do, it's a genetic thing, they reckon, again, to do with taste buds, where people that do like it, it's something, how you taste, like sour taste, it's something to do with the tongue. I don't know.
Well,
I
did try an olive when I tried loads of olives like in my 20s, and to me they just tasted like soapy dishwater. It was horrible, just like But I don't know what happened. As I said, I just woke up and everything tasted good, including ale and olives. So as I sit here now, mate, I don't. It's probably the effects of many years ale, and I look slightly spawn bound.
Like an olive.
Yeah.
I like a nice Indian pale ale, an IPA. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm into at the minute.
Can't beat them, can you? And do you know what? There's loads of these little micro breweries popped up all over the place now, isn't there?
Yeah, we did some work for one. Hop Kettle is called. They were the people behind the Red Lion in Cricklade near Swindon. I think he sold the pub but kept the brewery.
Right.
And they're lovely. They do some real nice ales, and I think that had something to do with the Eternal Optimist in town in Swindon. Yeah, they do. They've been doing a delivery service, obviously, because the bars are shut.
Right.
So they've been doing delivery of bottles and of kegs of beer.
Yeah.
So like free delivery and everything as well. So yeah, really good. Well worth trying. I don't know. They probably wouldn't deliver to you. They might deliver to Siren, actually, get them to drop them off at the unit.
Yeah, I think that might be a bit too far for me, mate. I am not too sure they'll deliver that.
I'll tell you, well, next time I do an order, I'll get a few extra, like a little sample pack for you to try, mate.
I can't wait, mate. As with you with a Cobra, you're going to finish that off with some sort of like chicken balti? Are you having a takeaway tonight, Dom?
I might do. I don't know. I don't know if I fully trust takeaways at the minute. Is it too risky? I don't know.
Anyway, I don't know.
We've done work recently in some Chinese takeaways.
You don't want to be doing You don't want to reveal the truth of what goes on.
No, exactly. I'll have to dig out a picture of Sam, one of the guys who works for me. Right. Bless him. His hoodie was covered. Where they were selling this cooker.
Okay.
And he had to get behind it to cut the gas off, and he was like, "Look at my head! It's like a big, massive. I don't know what colour you'd call it. Like a beigey, orangey, browny line of greasy mank down his like light grey hoodie." I was like, "Sorry about that." And I messaged the owner and I said, "Just to let you know, if you want us to fit the next one, make sure it's clean behind there." And I forwarded a picture that Sam sent me. Like, "I'm really sorry about that. Please apologise to Sam."
Yeah, I've just sent the photo to the health inspector and 2 stars taken off your health.
Yeah. Oh. No bats inside.
Yeah, no deep fried bats. Oh, mate, anyone that's listened to this for the first 5 minutes will think, is this a carp podcast?
Yeah, I know. It's all right. It's all good. We got plenty of time, mate. Carp, then let's talk about it. Before we discuss lockdown and everything else, give us some of your memorable captures, something that sort of sticks out in your mind, one that we can, get the juices flowing.
Oh, blimey, mate. It's, yeah, do you know what? I thought you might ask me about a memorable capture. And like any angler, mate, there's been loads of great podcasts. And I must say, before I get into any sort of memorable captures, Dom, hats off, mate. You've been absolutely podcast crazy, and I've enjoyed every single one of them.
Thank
yeah,
you,
it's been
mate.
really, really good. It's been really helpful for lockdown. Just you pushing these out once a day. Be under no illusions, mate. That's hard work. Not sort of contacting the guys and sort of getting a relationship with them, but yeah, just keeping it up, mate. It's good stuff. So big thanks from me. And I've really enjoyed the last. Well, today I've had a bit of a spodcast purge. I've listened right from Adam Penning's one up, and brilliant, really good stuff. Love Penning's one. Lewis Porter was really good. Really find that interesting. Loads. Lance Barton, which we'll link to probably a capture in a minute. Actually, sort of rekindled some lovely Christchurch memories, and Jacob and Alfie and those guys. They were different, isn't it? It's just different. A real nice cross section of guests you've had on. So yeah, hats off, mate.
Awesome, thank you, mate. Appreciate
so
that.
Memorable. Did you ask me memorable captures? Is that what it was?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Blimey. Do you know what? Do you know one that springs to mind? And it only springs to mind because I've listened to Lance Barton today. There's loads, as an angler. Oh crikey, what am I now? I'm 40. I'm 40. That's what it is. I'm a 40. Yeah. I'm a 40-pounder.
Same as me, mate.
Mate, I'm a 40-pounder, but feel like a high 20. Do you never feel like you get any older, do you, Dom?
No, exactly. Yeah, I thought if I was going to mature, it would have happened by now. No, 40.
As I said at the start, the only place that's maturing on me is my guts.
Yeah,
and that's it.
And my grey hair. I'm definitely I've got lockdown hair going on. Luckily, I've been wearing a hard hat today, keeping it under wraps. But the sides, it's like bushy ground. Like, I've got some clippers somewhere. I am tempted.
Mate, I went for the lockdown cut the other day. I'm not ashamed to say that I watched a YouTube tutorial on how to give myself a fade. So from a 4, a 3, a 2 down to a 1. And I watched that YouTube tutorial about 3 times, some Turkish guy. And then he finished it off with burning the ear hair with the
you didn't do that, did you?
With the earbud, sort of dipping it in.
Yeah.
I thought I'd leave that out. But I cut my own hair, and mate, I'm not going to do that again. It took me about 3 hours trying to look at 3 or 4 mirrors that I'd sort of balanced in the bathroom. It was a disaster, but I think I got there. But not that anyone's going to see it. But at least I've I've managed to cut all the grey out.
Nice. Yeah, I think that'll be me, and maybe over the weekend. It's just I've noticed when I get up, it sort of stands tall, and it probably adds about 3 inches to my height.
You want about your hair, Dom? Or?
Yeah. No, I'd say it'd be 1.5 inches otherwise.
Sorry, mate. Sorry, yeah. I'm X-rated on this podcast. I know it's viewing. You were talking about memorable captures, mate. Do you know what? As I said at the start there, the podcast purge that I've done today, Lance Barton was talking about his time on Christchurch and Stoneacres, and it rekindled some really fond memories. So I guess it'd be really nice. I've never really told this story to talk about. As Christchurch is famous for, or those Oxfordshire waters are famous for, there's loads and loads of beautiful carp around that part of the world, isn't there? And as you know, because you've only just sort of stopped fishing it, really, back, I guess, for my story, it takes me back to when Lynch Hill wasn't that busy. I know that sounds crazy now, and the reason I guess I'm picking this capture is because I really enjoyed Lance's podcast, as I say. And if I go back, I don't know, when I first started fishing Lynch Hill, I reckon it was about I reckon I first fished it about 15 years ago.
Right.
And do you know what? Carp fishing, I reflected on this today before I knew I was coming onto the podcast, and I can't believe, it's hard to imagine how popular carp fishing has become in that short space of time. And I guess growing up with a role model like my dad sort of took me trout fishing from a very early age. Like I was like 5 or 6 when he would sort of drag me out of bed at like God unearthly hour in the morning, I didn't used to like it to start with because it's it's alien, isn't it? You're in a warm house, they drag you out. Come on, you're coming fishing. Da, 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 da. But within a couple of trips, I think you realise quite quickly that it's part of you. It's who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even at that sort of young, tender age, I'd be wrapped up. But my dad's sort of chosen venue was Chew Valley Lake. So, if
Right.
anyone who doesn't know Chew Valley Lake, that's 1,200 acres of, of trout fishery. Now, of course, they stock trout in there, but they stock them small, Dom. So
Mm.
things like watercraft and everything else that you would imagine which comes to play there in terms of being successful on a large lake like that, um, all is a kind of a necessity to be successful on those huge reservoirs. But what it did sort of give me was this real desire to sort of be outside and be almost like disconnected, from the world.
Mm.
Because at
Yeah.
1,200 acres, you would very rarely see many anglers back when I was a kid there. Of course, there was a few dotted around and a few boats about, but my dad was a real countryman, and I think he set the bar quite high without really realizing it at that
Yeah.
tender age for me. And what I mean by set the bar high, what he wanted, what he's given me, he gave me a desire to kind of really enjoy my own company. So
Mm-hmm.
you kind of when you're in that bigger space and you're not seeing many anglers, it was such a beautiful time, and we'd catch a couple of trout, and we'd take them home to my mum, and my dad would make me gut them, etc., etc. And yeah, I had this real desire for those lovely, quiet angling trips. So why I've kind of alluded to that is that 15 years ago, when I first sort of stepped foot on Lynch Hill, although it wasn't busy, and nowhere near as busy as it was in comparison to what it is today. Um,
Yeah.
it was still a shock to the system because I'd up until that point, prior to those 15 years ago, I'd fished waters that were fairly quiet, but you could class Lynch Hill even back then, despite it being nowhere near as busy as now, was still you could class kind of a circuit water, Dom.
Mm-hmm.
There was still, the carp were getting bigger and bigger and bigger and growing, 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 and that was attracting more attention. And at the same time, obviously, carp fishing was getting busier, and rightly so. Rightly so. It's not a criticism. How can I
Yeah.
criticize something I love for somebody else wanting to get into it? Dom,
Yeah. Yeah.
it always kind of makes me smile when people criticize how busy carp fishing has become, and you think actually we're all part of it. We're all part of carp fishing, and you can't criticize anyone for starting carp fishing. It's addictive, mate, isn't it? It's addictive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it brings so many different things to different people, which is the beauty of it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so in terms of Lynch Hill, going sort of fast forwarding the clock a little bit, I've done a little bit on and off at Lynch Hill for a few years, but I kept sort of coming away thinking, bloody hell, that's busy. But one thing it does grab you with Lynch Hill, especially back then, it was one of those first waters that you could observe your quarry. It was in
Yeah.
clear, and those scaly carp cruising along the marginal shelf while you're sat up a tree, just dipping down, and you can see the whites of their lips, just sucking in a couple of pellets or a few bits of crumb. That's addictive, mate, isn't it? When you
Mm.
got that at your disposal, and at the time petals were still about, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think Lynch Hill was that kind of hotbed of, I suppose, carp fishing talent. People certainly learn a lot
Yeah.
at Lynch Hill and Christchurch and those sort of things because it basically, if you weren't a quick learner, Christchurch had the ability to sort of chew you up and spit you out. Those fish are quite
Mm.
cute and under immense pressure. But yeah, so if I fast forward to the clock, the capture, I suppose, that I'm alluding to, mate, is that I'd fished Lynch Hill for 3 or 4 years and met some lovely people. But I guess what I struggled with the most, mate, in terms of Lynch Hill was where it was because of how busy it was, and I was just
Mm.
at that point. I would do a Friday or a Saturday night from.
Right.
So
Yeah.
by now, we're talking only it was about 7 or 8 years back since I first stepped foot on the complex. And when I was getting there, mate, I literally was slotting in. Like I'm
Hmm.
talking a swim. Probably, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't even know the names of them now, but probably the day only swim right down the end past the point on Christchurch.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was that one probably free. There was probably one in between the entries. Basically, I had zero ability to use any watercraft at all.
Yeah,
And
so what you mean,
you're slotting in, and you're just hoping that those fish are at some point for me, over my 24 hours that I had at my disposal, might drift down in front of me. And
Mm.
yeah, that was alien, and I really, really had a love-hate relationship with it, Dom. So,
Yeah.
it was, and of course, I'd never experienced people saying, "Can I put a bucket behind you? Do you mind if I come in here after you?"
Me to poo in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. "Can I leave the shit bucket behind you?" "Oh, great, then, crack
Yeah.
on. Yeah, yeah, no problem."
Off with it.
Yeah, yeah. I'd never experienced any of that long ago, and it was weird, mate. It was weird, as I say, coming from years as a youngster on an inland sea to getting into carp fishing, and obviously coming eventually to my first sort of circuit water, Lynch Hill. It's just I found it really hard, and this love-hate
Yeah.
relationship started with it then, mate. So I carried on fishing Lynch Hill, and I would often turn up on a Friday, mate, and knowing straight away my heart would sink when I'd go through the gate because the car
Mm.
park was packed. It
Yeah.
was packed. And I knew straight away, I was thinking, I am absolutely pissing in the wind here, especially if I
Mm.
didn't have 3, 4, 5 days at my disposal. So you'd often see me drop in at the time onto Willow because that was quiet. And in fact, I could probably get a swim and use a little bit of watercraft at times because Willow
Yeah.
was nowhere near as popular as Christchurch back then, and probably isn't now, obviously, with the size of the fish. And you
Yeah.
know what? I used to enjoy that. I used to enjoy, oddly,
It's a lovely water, isn't it, Willow? Sorry to cut in, Mike, but it's always in the shadow of Christchurch. But you think even if that was a water on its own, it would be stunning, wouldn't it, Willow,
oh,
with those fish in there?
absolutely. And do you know what? I was fishing, obviously, Willow before they had the floods. And I know
Hmm.
when the flood around Oxford and all around the country went into Willow, it did suffer. It did put the fish back for a few years. Willow
Yeah.
didn't quite, but at the time when I was fishing it, mate, the fish were pumped up. They were looking, they were in their prime years. Like any carp of a certain age, mate, they go through their prime, don't they? They get to sort of
Mm.
20, 25 years old. And if they've had a healthy life, they are looking pumped and prime. But of course, once they get to 35 and they're 30 or 35 and they're almost, they're at the end of their life, aren't they? So they are on
Mm.
decline to a degree. I mean, it's a generalization term, but when I was fishing
Yeah.
Willow, they were definitely on their prime, and I was fortunate to have some lovely carp out of Willow, and I actually had the what's it called, the half lin at over £40, and that was that was a lovely fish, and again, it was in its prime, it's real pumped up. And do you know what? I didn't, despite it being kind of my second choice, because I would often rush down to Christchurch on the track, knowing full
Yeah.
well, mate, that this love-hate relationship that I had with Christchurch was like, I just knew that within an hour of going around, because you had to be a bit ruthless as well, Dom, and it was at
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
time it wasn't in my
Definitely.
character.
Same, exactly the same as that, mate. I'm not like that, and a few guys. I've had this conversation with quite a few people. That you have to be if you want to do well on
Yeah,
there. You have to be ruthless. And I'm just like, I'm not really a fish at all costs type person. I don't
yeah.
know. Yeah, it's just your nature, isn't
Well,
it?
I think that's it, and I think it's the way. Quite often, it's the way you're brought up, or the angling etiquette that somebody's taught you, like a role
Mm,
model. And I didn't find it comfortable saying, going straight up to every angler on that lake when I first arrived on a Friday and asking every single one as I do a lap when they're staying till. And as soon as I seen
mm,
a little opportunity that they're going to go, I'm going to bivvy up behind you or set me back. I just didn't like it, Dom. Didn't
mm,
like it. It just felt odd. It felt and it felt like, to me, in the end, and this is where this love-hate relationship come. And I don't want to sound critical of the complex because it's a beautiful place. And
yeah.
I got on with Julie and the family. They were great. They how they manage that place for so long is beyond me, because carp fishing can be a hard gig to manage, can it, Dom? But
Mm, yeah.
yeah. So where was I going? Yeah, so I turned up on a Friday, and obviously doing a lap and asking everyone where when are they going, and can I slot in behind them. It started to wear thin, mate, and it felt like, Christchurch for me felt like a bit of a merry-go-round. Whereas
Mm,
if you got in a swim and you bided your time and you put a bit of bait and you angled well, and you got where the fish were, you'd have your chance at catching a few big fish. But it was very
mm,
much dependent on where those fish were, and is the angling pressure dictated that I can move? And 90% of the time, mate, you can't move, can you?
No, absolutely. You're
Hemmed
just
in.
stuck there.
You're hemmed in, and it's pot luck to a degree. If the weather conditions change, great. Then if you can predict that, lovely. But I didn't have that at my disposal, Dom. I literally had one night, and it was like 12 hours. So I
Mm.
fished Lynch on and off like that for about 3 or 4 years. And
Right.
as I say, I dropped on Willow a couple of times and had some lovely fish out of there. But the last kind of this is alluding to this capture. So the last kind of straw, I guess, for me is that I pulled up in the car park, mate, and I seen this guy loading his wheelbarrow, and it was. Do you know when you get
Mm.
that? You get people that have fished these lakes will know exactly what I'm talking about. He's opened his boot. I've opened my boot, and I've thought to myself, he's opened it a bit quicker than me. He's got his barrow out, fully loaded, before I've even thought about taking my work tie off and my shirt, because that's what I used to work in at the time, and
Yeah.
thinking about putting my tracksuit bottoms on, like me fishing kit. And I'm thinking, fucking hell, he is loaded up quick. So I thought, I better start loading up a bit quicker. So I'm like dragging stuff out as quick as I can, and it's like a bit of a mental game of chess, isn't it? And within a couple of minutes, mate, I'd managed to load my barrow, chuck it all on there, thinking, fucking hell, this feels wrong. But this was the last straw, mate. He loaded his barrow and he ran. He ran down the track, and I'm thinking, "You have got to be joking me!" I don't mind loading my barrow quick, but I am not running. And he literally ran, and ironically, he did get the last swim on Christchurch.
Yeah.
And do you know what? After that point, I did end up going down Christchurch that night. After that point, I sat there and thought, "Man, this is not for me." Like beautiful fish.
Yeah.
I caught plenty of beautiful fish out of there. And I guess
Mm.
on the odd occasion I got kind of lucky. But so I started to then think at the time, this will sound weird to people that have fished it recently. At the time, Stoneacres wasn't that busy, Dom.
Yeah.
And what was great is that at the time you were allowed. There was a lot of boating going on out there, but you weren't
Right.
allowed to drop up from a boat. Although I'm sure people did on the sly, um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they
Of course.
but there was a lot of boating going on out there, but you had to cast from the bank. But what that did at the time when I was fishing Christchurch, I'd always sort of skip the rods in on Christchurch or on the way home, or when Christchurch was really busy, I just want to walk in a bit of peace and quiet. I'd take a little walk around Stoneacres, just because at the time it was a
Hmm.
syndicate and it was all on the same ticket.
Right.
So and the amount of times I found those fish in the edge on Stoneacres was fantastic. Was fantastic, and it was just one of those opportunities where I knew Christchurch was getting busy, and it was sort of wearing me down a little bit. I was actually starting to
Mm.
not enjoy my fishing. It was my main water. I'd pay for the season ticket, and I
Yeah.
just wasn't enjoying it. So I started to find the fish in the edge on Stoneacres. And prior to this, I knew a couple of people that were doing days only on Stoneacres, because at the time
Right.
I think you could even get a day ticket. You could get a days
Okay.
only day ticket. This is a long time ago. Um, and they done really well catching them at the edge. Nathan Fox got another guy from Bristol. He was catching them out of the. There was an
Right.
overflow pipe that used to. It's still there actually. There was a pipe that used to come in from the gravel workings on the right hand side, and when that used to, even at a trickle, like it's well documented, mate. Carp love flowing water. I think they love
Mm.
the smell of it.
Mm.
And talking about flowing water, actually, when Willow flooded, Dom, and it came in from the
Mm.
river over the top of the Med Bank into Willow,
Yeah.
and it was coming over like a waterfall. Those carp, they get a little hint of a pasture's new, and they were
Mm.
all up tight to the bank, trying to get up that bank like a salmon. It's really strange. I remember going through there on my waders that time, and they were all sort of nosing the flow, and it was almost like they go a
Right.
bit dopey. It's almost you could have picked them up, Dom. You could have picked them up. They were
Really.
literally trying to get up the flow over the bank, and a
Yeah.
few actually did. A few did, and those Oxford floods definitely put a lot of fish in the Thames over the years. But anyway,
Mm.
I digress. So yeah, that little trickle of the pipe that used to come in from the workings over the back there that came into Stoneacres. You probably go over that pipe as you go down towards Christchurch. You know the one on about, Dom? Go
Yeah. Yeah.
past
Yeah. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
little bit further down, just on the left there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Nathan Fox over the years. done really well out of there, just fishing days right in the edge. And I always used to enjoy walking around. And I used to say, and I used to find them in the edge. So I was getting towards the end of my time on Christchurch and the whole complex. To be fair, I had pastures near my sites, and they were definitely going to be quiet lakes. I had a few quiet lakes lined up, sacrificed the size of the carp. So, but I was determined to maybe just have a little go, just have a little go on Stoneacres. And this one time, I'd found them actually in the cafe bay. And anyone that knows the Cafe Bay, and this is why Lance's podcast actually brought back so many memories, because the way he described it the other day was almost exactly as it happened with me. So the wind was trickling in. As I say, Stoneacres was never that busy. Nobody really, once they were at the time, nobody really liked to sort of be on their toes, travel light. I had no choice. I didn't have much time at my disposal. I had to do that. I had to travel light. I couldn't afford to sit in a swim. That bait and weight approach was not for me. I literally had no time in my disposal. So if I wanted to catch a carp on the Friday night, stroke Saturday morning, I literally had to be on my toes and try and find an opportunity. So I took you there, Dom.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
I lost you there.
Oh, I'm here.
You there? Yeah. So I had to be on my toes to find an opportunity. I pulled the car in the car park after a really stressful week at work. And ironically, I hadn't been fishing for a while because it wasn't long after my dad passed away. So I wasn't really feeling fishing. But like anything, when something happens in your life, like a life trauma, mental health, other things that we're all affected by. I'd lost my dad, and that sort of really, really knocked me for six. I kind of pulled myself together and thought, you know what? I need to go fishing. Fishing has always been part of who I am. But I just didn't fancy mixing it with the crowds of Christchurch. So I had set in my sights that I was going to have a go on Stoneacres by hook or by crook. I was going to have a couple of rods, travel light, and this session in particular, just for midnight, I'm going to try and drop a couple of rigs in the edge, because it was that time of the year, where they were active. It was warm. And there was, if I could find them at the time, the Stoneacres carp were, just to love getting in the edge. So anyway, I pulled the carp in the car park as usual, packed. I thought, bloody hell, this is crazy. And so I've loaded the barrow really light, and I've managed to get about, I don't know, 20 yards, Dom. I've got 20 yards, and I've got into the Cafe Bay. Now, because it was a group ticket, obviously anyone could have done this that was fishing the complex. How, I don't know, the previous 20 people didn't see these carp that are probably shot down to Christchurch.
I was going to say, because they were running past.
They're running so fast, getting the Christchurch. The speed didn't allow them to focus on the prize. They're right in the face, literally just in the Cafe Bay. So I was the last, almost like always the last to turn up, and it was almost like fate. Do you know, the wind was trickling in? It was on those balmy evenings, and I put the Polaroids on, mate. Sort of slowly edged my way, because I always used to look in there. It's just one of those places where you can't fail to look.
It just feels carpy,
mate,
doesn't it?
Feels carpy, doesn't it? It's and the first fish I seen in there was choco.
Oh.
I looked at it, I thought, shit in hell, that big dark chocolate submarine, and no mistaking it, absolutely no mistaking it, just a beast of a carp. And that fish had a real sort of Mary-esque sort of stature. I think it had, didn't it? Not many carp, in this day and age. There's that old saying, don't make them like you used to, but the length of a carp, isn't it? Those, for me, that's one of the characteristics that stand out. Those long carp, like Mary's mate. Mary wasn't massively long, but Mary's mate, etc. The black mirror, their spinal length is huge, and as they grow proportionally, it doesn't look better, does it? They never look gutty; they just look big. Choco was one of those carp. It just looked long and big, and I couldn't believe it, mate. You'd freeze on the spot, that you're like a heron, and you imagine momentarily that. In my mind, I don't know how many carp anglers have done this. You imagine momentarily that you become invisible. You imagine that you've got the best reel tree camo on known to any carp ever, But the reality is, I just peered over from the car and I had like a shirt tie and shirt and tie on. I just looked like a bright rainbow staring them in the face. But I still sort of went dead still, like froze. Feel like blended sky maybe with my blue shirt on. But I don't know whether there was a glare or whether they were just preoccupied, whether they'd been there for a few hours and they were well into feeding. I managed to get away with it. And you think how busy that car park is, Dom? You'd like
Yeah,
that they'd
yeah.
be on edge in that cafe bay, but they weren't. They were at times they're just not. They were in that bay. They'd obviously that's their home, isn't it? They know that area of the
Yeah.
lake is noisy.
Yeah, I suppose it's their norm,
Yeah, it's
isn't
their
it?
norm, isn't it? And when you imagine when that cafe used to open as well, the anglers used to come up for breakfast. It's noisy, isn't it? But they still used to get in there. And one thing they did used to do before I sort of allude, they used to get in there, mate, in the coldest of winters as well.
All
So
right.
I remember one angler doing very well at the cafe bay in the winter. But anyway, I digress. So the wind was trickling. The first carp I've seen was Choco, and then I seen this incredibly long, huge. I didn't know all the carp in there, Dom. And in fact, at that time, there was still, I suppose, a little bit of mystery to Stoneacres. It wasn't as well documented as it
Yeah,
has,
yeah.
with the recent crop of anglers that have fished it. The Scott Lloyds and people like that. And obviously, a guy I was recently speaking to actually, who I'd done the odd session with, Brett from up north. Bloody good angler. His
Right.
album,
Yeah.
Stoneacres Carp, really, really is something special. But anyway, but at that time, there was a few sort of surprises, fish that had gone a long time without getting caught, Dom. And they were all, they weren't nowhere near as big as they were when they sort of hit the dizzy heights of, say, 5 or 6 years ago. But they were on the up,
Yeah.
mate. The Stoneacres was creeping up, but everything at the time used to be kept a little bit hush hush.
Yeah.
Christchurch used to get all the limelight, Willow too. The guys on Stoneacres, yeah, rest assured, mate, they were catching a few cracking carp, but they were, Instagram wasn't as,
Yeah,
and they used
absolutely.
to almost go under the radar a little bit. So anyway, this fish sort of melted in on the right hand side, the wind's trickling in, and it was just long, and it was almost as long as Choco, but it just didn't have the depth. But one thing that
Right.
stood out immediately was the size of his plated scales. There was plated scales all over it, and it was one of those carp where I just couldn't believe it. I thought, bloody hell, what is that? And I'd known a couple of them, as I say, but not all of them in Stoneacres, and that was enough, mate.
Yeah.
That was enough. I got my gear out of the car quicker than the time I raced that man down the track. So yeah, I contradicted myself there, mate. I ran as fast as I could round to Cafe Bay, which is about 20 steps.
Yeah.
I I
Sprint.
sprinted. Yeah, sprinted. Didn't even have a chance to get out of breath, mate, 'cause I think it was
Yeah.
one breath in total by the time I got round to Cafe Bay.
Yeah.
And the light was fading quickly, so they were in there quite late in the day, which was they weren't chasing the sun, which they used to love doing in that Cafe Bay, or they do it around all the margins, don't they? They love chasing the sun. They were in there because the wind was trickling in, and they were obviously feeding on something. They were feeding on something there. Are you there, Dom? Hello? Oh, I think I've lost Dominic. But anyway, yeah, they were feeding in there for a reason. So I set the brolly up well back, right the way back from the water's edge, and I thought I don't really know how to approach this. They're in there, they're feeding, um, and I just assumed that I need to either wait for them to leave. Sorry, mate, I just said, "Are
Yeah.
you gone?" But I realised you probably
Yeah, I'm
get rid of
here.
that
Sorry, the
cobra kicked
washing machine was playing up. No, carry on talking. I'm going to get another beer.
Okay,
Carry on
you get
talking.
another beer, mate. Yeah, so the
Yeah.
wind was trickling, so I sat well back, and as Lance alluded to in the podcast, actually, they were in there feeding. So last thing you want to do is cast on their heads. Like it's a tiny little bay. It's a tiny, tiny little bay, and at the time there was an old rickety wooden jetty stuck out from the bank. It was rotten. It was rotten, but it used to get covered in like caddis and snails because there was like little fronds of weed that used to hang down from it, but also all the rotten wood. And if you've ever taken a piece of old bark at the margins or a bit of wood, you've got to break it open. You look at it, and it's usually full of caddis, absolutely
Yeah.
full of caddis or shrimp. And I genuinely think that they were feeding around that because they were really localized. They were like feeding off almost like the wooden bits of the jetty that was in the water. And once they get preoccupied on naturals, they know exactly where they want to be at certain times of the year. They were
Yeah.
probably feeding off those caddises for years. They knew that place at the right time of year was the place to be. So as the sun went down, mate, I thought, I thought I don't really know what to do here. But I spent the next hour just before it went almost completely black, just watching these fish feeding. And that big,
Yeah.
long, scaly one, Dom, one that
Mm.
was almost as long as Choco, was really interesting. He was coming up off the bottom, and he had a funny shaped mouth. He had a funny shaped mouth. He was
Mhm.
coming up off the bottom and eating what I now probably know as caddis or shrimp off the weed stems that were up off the bottom and also off the bits of wood of the jetty.
Right.
And it had a funny shaped mouth, and I thought to myself, "How the hell am I going to catch that?" For one, it's feeding really weird because it's not on the deck, and for two, it's got a
Yeah.
bit of a funny shaped mouth. I was like, "I haven't got a clue what to do here." So I went back to the brolly, sort of took a couple of breaths. These are big carp, at the time. Chocolate was
Mm.
was was nudging 50 pound, and this other big long one was long but nowhere near as deep. So
Yeah.
I thought to
Yeah.
myself, I'm just going to tie a really long choddy up. And I say long, I don't use choddies, Dom. They're not really part of my armory. But in the right
Yeah.
time or the right place, especially when you've only got sort of one cast or two casts.
Exactly. That's where they come into their own,
Yeah,
isn't it? Discretion
yeah,
almost.
yeah. And I wanted something that was quite high off the deck, and I wanted to almost get it in amongst some of the little weed fronds. So it's almost
Right.
like where this fish was feeding up off the bottom, then I could sort of mimic a bait, sort of, well, something to eat that was hung up quite high.
Yeah. Got you.
So I went for a
Yeah.
real high choddy. Atlantic Carp will pop up, one of my favourites, and I just sort of I seen them just do a little lap out the bay. So they went out the bay, and it was almost dark at this stage, Dom, and I just assumed that's it,
Mm.
they're gone. They're going for the night. But I could stay till about 12 o'clock the next day. So one rod, I sort of
Mhm.
swung this little choddy out just next to the wooden jetty that was on the opposite side of Cafe Bay. And
Yeah.
I just sort of felt it go down. When you get that satisfying feeling as a carp angler, don't you? When you swing the rod out and it just gives that little lovely soft touchdown. And I
Yeah.
don't know about
Yeah.
you, but do you envisage what now the rig is doing on the bottom?
Yeah. 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 And yeah, I don't like a hard crack. I like a soft thud, like a stop, but a pronounced stop, but not an exaggerated stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I envisage now that because I'd spent ages looking where to cast, and in fact I went round
Mm.
and chucked a little white pop up on the spot where I wanted the lead to land because I could see where the weed
Mhm.
was, and I could see that next to it was an absolute bowled out rock hard gravel edge, and that gravel edge went into a snag bush into the corner of the cafe bay. No way was I
Mhm.
casting on that. That was way too blatant. And they were avoiding it. They were all around this wooden jetty. So I put a white pop up from the other side, quickly ran round, and then sort of swung it out tight to this jetty where the low lying weed was, but just high enough with the fronds to disguise my stupidly blatant high pop up. So, and that in my mind was about as good as I was going to get. I put 7 boilies over the top. Um,
Yeah.
and Adam Pennant had a weird thing. He's got it might just be might be many of us actually, but it's
Yeah.
everything is in multiples of seven for me. So it's seven.
Right. Simon Scott's another one, isn't he?
Yeah,
As
quite the
well.
same. He likes 7 grains of sweet corn, doesn't he? But I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know where that comes from. It. I really don't. It's been,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it might be 7 spoms, 7 catapults of hemp. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
always multiple of seven. So 7 boilers went over the top, and I put this one rod down, and I sat back on my bed chair, which was about 20 foot back. It's still in
Mm.
the bay, but right way back from the water's edge, and I just left it there. And I watched the sun go down, mate. And do you know what? For the first time in a long time on the complex, I couldn't hear another angler. Couldn't hear a radio. Couldn't hear anyone shouting. Didn't see a spom land. And do you know what? That sun dipped, and for the first time in a long time, I was really enjoying my angling, and I thoroughly, thoroughly embraced that night. As I said, it'd been a long time since I had the rods out, and losing my dad, it was really hard to sort of get the motivation to go. But
Yeah. I know that feeling,
yeah,
mate.
it's hard, mate, isn't it? Nothing catapulted me back more so than what I
Yeah.
just described and seen that day. And do you know what? I
Mm.
drifted off at about, I don't know what time it was, about 12 o'clock, and almost felt a bit dejected because I'd sort of felt that I'd missed the opportunity, Dom, because the fish was
Yeah.
clearly drifted out the bay. And
Yeah.
3 or 4 hours earlier, I may have been able to sneak a rig in while they were still feeding and had that chance. So I drifted off. But do you know what? For me, after a busy week at work, it's the simple pleasures in life that I really enjoy.
Mhm.
Just seeing that sun dip down, mate, and enjoying the sunset, that's good enough. That was good enough
Yeah.
for me. That was almost like a win. If you fish a circuit water and you can't get on the fish, if you don't embrace nature and embrace some of the sights that you see, then you're in for a long old trip. So,
Yeah.
and the sunsets on Stoneacres, mate. Well, that whole part of the world is beautiful, isn't it?
Mm.
They go really
Mhm.
bright orange, and it was just one of those perfect settings. So I sat there, had a cup of tea, unwound from work, and at that point, mate, I'm drifting off into a carpy dream. You know what it's like.
Mm.
There's
Yeah,
no
yeah.
better feeling, is there? The rods are what? A rod. I only had a rod out. I just daren't put another rod out. Put the net down, and I just drifted off completely into one of those slumbers, mate. Do you know where you're dribbling on the pillow and your arm's gone dead? That sort of thing, and you're just literally gone, aren't you? And sometimes I'm sure you're mumbling or snoring. Well, I don't care. Whatever's going on, mate. I'm not interrupting anyone because I'm here on my own. And the next thing I can remember, mate, I hadn't even woken up. That old classic. I woke up, put the kettle on, watched the sunrise. Yeah,
Yeah.
we all do that, and I do that also. But at this point in time, I'd slept right the way through, which was rare. But obviously, I think when you've been through some mental stress and all that, it's
Yeah.
nice just to have when your mind eventually turns off, you're gone, aren't you? That's like
Mm.
comatose sleep. So that's where I was right then. And next thing I know, I was just like absolute one toner on my little Neville, like. And when you're in that such deep sleep, mate, where you think,
Yeah.
"Ah, it's not mine. That'll go away in a minute. Ah, no,
Yeah.
that's somebody else's alarm. It's not a work day. I ain't got to get up. No, that's not me." And all of a sudden, your brain must go, "What are you
Yeah.
doing? Get up!
You're at the
Get up!
lake.
It's
Yeah.
you! It's you! It's you!" And then you just literally go into absolute panic. "Oh, it is me! It is me!" And you like roll off the bed chair, don't you? Fortunately, it was like one of those summer nights, so I had the bag sort of off, but I literally collapsed into the kettle. Kettle went over, and you scramble into the rod. You think, "What is going on?" You feel like completely delirious, don't you? So I've lifted into
Mm.
this rod, Dom, and it is literally gone straight out the bay now, and it is going
Yeah.
zzz, and it feels like I'm attached to a marlin. Right? I literally can't get a turn on it. I can't get a turn on it, and as much as I'm trying to clamp the spool, it's getting faster and faster.
Mm.
Clearly, it's got a bit of
Yeah.
momentum, and I'm
Yeah.
fucked. I'm already against the ropes here, and he's got the upper hand. He is going and going and goes, and yeah, mate, I can visualize it now. And as I say, I've never really told this story. I can visualize it now. I've got the rod bent in full curve down to the right, and the line's going off, obviously, out of the bay and is heading towards the abyss of Stoneacres. 60 acres of
Mm.
beautiful, weedy, dim, clear lake. But for me, that is hell because there's weed everywhere.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I'm thinking, oh man, I've got no chance here. This is built up some momentum. It is leapt out the water like a salmon. And I could see the li I could it was really strange, Dom. It's going "zzz," and then I could see the line cutting up through the water, and I'm thinking, "What the?" And then it literally come out like a tail walking pike. And this thing is like 3.5 foot long, and all I could see in the sun as it goes down is the sun's hit the scales of this fish's flank, and it's like kadoosh, and it's literally left the water like a salmon and flopped back in, and I could see the pop-up rig hanging from its mouth. And I'm thinking, what the I actually thought, when you have that moment, "That is that" 'cause there was some huge pike in there, Dom. I don't know,
Mm.
a couple of the pike guys, I don't know if they're in there anymore, but there was some massive pike. And anyone that
Yeah.
ever fishes a choddy, those pike lover can be
Yeah.
susceptible to a
Yeah.
choddy, especially a fish meal choddy. I thought, "I've got a pike. It's gotta be a pike." And it has come clattering down, but I caught the glimpse of the scales in the
Mm.
sun. And at that point, your legs go to jelly, mate, don't they? They are
Yeah.
literally on tenterhooks. The adrenaline's built up in the bloodstream, and for a carp angler, that's the addictive part of why we go, isn't it? That feeling of that adrenaline hit, which you can't
Yeah.
control, and you're in this battle of trying to keep calm because you want everything to go, and you don't want to make any rash decisions at this stage, do you? you've got something really special on the end. If you let that adrenaline take over and make some rash decisions, pull too hard, or try and if it hits a bit of weed, you get a bit excited and try and give it a bit too much, it can all go wrong. So I'm fighting off the adrenaline, and I'm trying to keep calm. And by this point, I've definitely woken up. I've woken up, and things are going up. Things are sort of coming back in my favour. So I've managed to gain some line, Dom. Long story short, 10 minutes of it literally beating me up, going absolutely crazy. It's come up again and flopped on its side, but I've managed to gain some line. It's getting closer and closer to the net. I've just sort of lowered myself into the margin. It's quite rocky there, off that cafe bay, because literally they must have built that little spit up by some spare gravel workings rubble. So they just lumped it in there, and the margins of Stoneacres are a bit like that. They got big sort of breeze blocky sort of stones, yeah. So it's wallowing and wallowing and wallowing, and then it's come up to sort of that first gulp of air, and I can see its mouth coming up and that lovely red pop up just dangling from its mouth. Its weird little twisted mouth, shall I say? But then as it kept coming up and coming up and coming up, thinking, where's the tail? And then the tail comes up like what felt like a Loch Ness moment. Come up miles back, and I thought, bloody hell! And it's sort of edge into the net, and you like to get them right in the net, don't you? Like kiss the spreader block, don't rush it. I'm there on my own. I'm trying to enjoy it, but at the same time, absolutely shitting myself, because there's always that sort of fear, isn't there? You're praying to, oh, please stay on, and in your mind, you're thanking every god known to man, aren't you?
God,
Yeah, and any god.
Religious for a few
Yeah,
minutes.
get religious. You're thanking Buddha, the Hindu this, anything. Please stay on, please stay on. Anyway, fortunately, let's say the carp gods on this occasion were in my favour, mate, and it's kissed the spreader block, and I've had to shuffle it in and sort of flop the tail in the net.
Yeah.
And so the battle was won. At that point, I sort of slumped down on a breeze block, just parked my ass on the breeze block, held that net, and I don't know what you do when you get a fish in the net, Don, but you mentioned on it on a podcast recently. It's very easy to get wrapped up in the moment and forget to take in the moment, isn't it? And that's why I like video, because video really lets you relive the moment. You'll forget when your adrenaline's still so high that you almost don't enjoy the buzz, do you?
Yeah, because you just, it's almost like you're not there, isn't it? It's a weird sensation, isn't it?
Well, it's only when you put the fish back, isn't it, that you sit there sometimes and reflect, and you think, what has just happened? That everything we want as a carp angler, but I can't actually remember much of it because it's the adrenaline was in my body and it sort of took over. But anyway, that morning, the adrenaline, I was waiting for it just to relax. I sat on the breeze block, just to take in the moment while this fish is completely beaten, just looking at me in the net, really angry, really tensed up. His dorsal was up like a sail, like a marlin, and his fins were out, like proper angry. And he was still smashing into the mesh of the net. And is it to say, like, I've made a mistake and I've really fucked up. And I sort of peered in the net, and you take a couple of seconds to compose yourself. And I had another peer in the net. I thought, bloody hell, it looks like a sea serpent, a big scaly sea serpent. And like you do, mate, you secure the net, don't you? I'm looking around, and of course, like I said at the start of the story, nobody was there. Nobody was around. It was too early in the morning. But besides that, there was nobody within, I don't know, 500-600 meters of me. One person way down the bank towards Christchurch, down that way. And so I secured the net. And one thing I love doing, I just like to have a cup of tea. Just have a cup of tea. Just see if you can just compose yourself. Let the fish relax a minute, just to compose myself. So when I get that fish out, I can handle it well. There's the mat's wet. I've got everything prepared. The way things all ready, everything's zeroed in. I don't. Sometimes you cringe, don't you? When you see people, the fish comes out super quick and nothing's ready. The scales aren't zeroed. The mat's not wet. So yeah, you just take that moment, don't you? Take that moment to compose yourself. I had a cup of. It was actually a cup of coffee that morning. And I've rolled the net down. I've lifted this fish up, bit the line, lifted this fish up, and it's getting heavier and heavier as the lift's going on, Dom. And I've led it on the unhooking mat. At the time, I've still got it actually. Still got it. It's I'd never sell it. It's one of those treasured mats I've had like almost all my carps in life. One of those old Jamie Cypri products mats. Carpy kettles, Jamie. Yeah, so he used to make these mats, the Cypriot products mats, all the Yately videos and the old Yately stuff. And at the time, I thought I was uber cool when I was like 15, buying a Yately mat. And you blame Terry Owen for that because he inspired a whole generation of Steve Neville, Chuck Taylors, and Cypriot products and looking mats, didn't he? But yeah, so I've led this fish down on the mat, mate, and the tail and the head are touching the edges of the mat. And the mat is 40, I think it's 42 inches wide. That mat.
Right.
So, and there aren't many, for anyone that knows, that likes to measure carp, there aren't many carp in the country, even now, that are recorded that have ever been over 40 inches.
Right.
So, and especially now, carp are almost built to go the other way, aren't they? Big guts, big stature. But yeah, this fish, the first thing that struck me was its length. The second thing that struck me was just how flipping scaly it was. And it was a phenomenal creature. Like just one of those fish that just takes your breath away, It's like, what the hell is that? So I zeroed everything in. I've got it on the scales, and it's gone 39, 39.8, 39.12, £40, and it's gone past £40 and sort of settled at £40.8. And then
Right.
I'm shaking at this point. You're shitting your pants, aren't you? Not only is it massively long, but you've got the added bonus. Not that weight makes any difference, but you've got the added bonus that it's gone over £40. And I eventually settled on. I got a storm pole and I sort of wedged it into one of the trees there, and I've lifted it up and it settled bang on sort of like £40.5. So I went for £40.4.
Right.
I went for £40.4, and I slipped it in the sack, mate, and went to go and find a photographer. And this guy that I woke up, he was down with his girlfriend actually, down on a bit further down the bank. It's always a bit sensitive if you go and wake
Yeah.
somebody up.
Hello.
Hi,
Yeah.
morning. Yeah, yeah. So, I don't like doing it at the best of times, but I didn't have a self-take kit at
Yeah.
the time, or a self-take kit at the time. So I went to wake him up, and yeah, the long story short, mate, that was a fish known as the number 9 bus.
Oh
It was
wow.
the fish known as the number 9 bus, and I was very, very fortunate. And it was you could say it was fate, you could say a bit of luck, you could say that actually I saw what I fished for. I fished what I saw. Whatever you want to say,
Yeah.
you can't pick them when you're fishing out in the pond like that. But I seen that fish the
Mm.
night before. I seen how it was feeding, and in a way, I guess I did try to fish for it like that. But man, I wasn't complaining. Either or, I'll take it because it was a phenomenal creature. And I don't quote me, Dom. I think that was the first time that fish may have gone over the £40 mark.
Oh well,
Um,
yeah. That's I know there's a lot of people that are on there that just want that fish. There are bigger fish in there, but that one gets talked
yeah,
about probably the most, I'd have
yeah,
said.
mate, and rightly so. There aren't, as I say, that it looked Mary's May esque, really long,
Mm.
really scaly. And of course, I've seen that fish um, in later years grow and grow and get bigger and bigger. And
Mm.
some of the photos I've seen, the sticky guys that have caught it, and some of the guys that take fantastic pictures with camera equipment that has advanced massively since the time when I caught it. Um, it still looks phenomenal, Dom, doesn't it? It looks
Mm.
incredible
Yeah.
carp. I know Mike Wilmot caught a couple of times, and I knew a few of the later Stoneacres guys that have caught. It's hard to
Yeah.
not make a good picture of that carp. It's
Yeah.
just something else. So yeah, I had a couple of quick snaps, mate. I slipped it back, and yeah, that was almost my Christchurch stroke Lynch Hill stroke Stoneacres journey come to an end because
Yeah.
passengers knew were
Oh wow.
calling, and yeah, with the crowds and how busy it got, despite Stoneacres still probably having the ability to draw me in, I was already, my heart was set on somewhere else. So it was almost like a lovely
Yeah.
sort of swan song. I did a few more sessions, of course I did, on the complex till my ticket ran out, but mate, that's something that I'm just reliving it now. I can still, the hairs on my arms are still on end, telling the
Yeah.
tale. And
Yeah. Mega.
yeah,
Wow. That's awesome. I was trying to suss out which fish it was you were talking about before you mentioned it. I thought it's either going to be the bus or Mr. Magoo, because Mr. Magoo's got like a bit of a quirky mouth as well,
yeah,
I
mate.
think.
Anyone that has ever watched that, I'd seen them before that. I mean, I jumped to that
Mm.
story. I'd seen a lot of those Stoneacres fish feeding in the edge way before I'd met them in Cafe Bay. I must add. But
Mm.
that number 9 bus, anyone that has seen it feed, it feeds really weird. And it likes to feed off of the bottom, from what I'd seen back
Right.
then, anyway. So I don't know how it's caught in later years, but I know a
Yeah.
couple of guys that did also catch it on quite a high chod.
Right.
But hey,
It's funny, isn't it? That maybe thinks it's safe, or it's just, yeah, like you say, with his
yeah.
mouth, it's just more convenient
Hey, I
for it.
watched a lot of those Lynch Hill complex fish feeding off the bottom. Christchurch fish were
Mm.
absolute like suckers for it. I remember one day sat up a tree, and baby poolies come in at the time, and
Yeah.
all the pellet and the little bits and bobs were on a little gravel patch in amongst all the Canadian. And I remember it coming
Mm.
in, and it literally would waft its pecks uh, ferociously, right, Dom? And then all the pellet and
Mm.
bits and bobs would go right up in like a plume of vortex, stick to the side of the Canadian. And then
Yeah.
what it would do, it'd come off the bottom and then feed off the sides of the Canadian, knowing full well that's safe. That's safe. So as you say, mate, and as a carp angler, it's quite stereotypical to find a clear spot and fish on it, isn't it? Um, and,
Yeah.
and, and, and it takes some doing to fish into the weed confidently with your approach. But man, those Christchurch fish knew exactly if that food
Yeah.
was held up in the weed stems, that was fair game, and they used to smack it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Mental. And something on that note, it always amazes me. You think like Stoneacres before he got busy, how fish get so huge on naturals, but then when you start talking about that and how they're conditioned and how they work and how they feed on all the shrimp and everything else, they're just feeding machines, aren't they? They just filter out all the chod and all the rubbish
Oh, mate, it's
and just keep
phenomenal.
all the protein rich.
Yeah, you like you look at the Black Mirror, for instance. That didn't get big on angler's
Mm,
bait, Dom, as you know. That
mm,
that fish was a tricky character. It didn't get it. It wasn't a circuit war by any stretch of the imagination. It didn't get
yeah.
it didn't get hundreds of kilos of bait a month like Christchurch does. That fish got huge on a natural diet. And in fact, I've just finished filming a bait maker's diary, Mark Bryant's latest bait maker's diary for Baitworks. And there's a
Hmm.
chapter
Yeah.
in that which actually goes live to when will this go out, Dom? Saturday.
No, go out today actually.
Will it?
Friday. I'll do it today. Yeah, I'll do it
Yeah,
tonight.
so
Yeah.
I just finished filming a chapter on there about what carp are doing in the early spring. Uh,
Hmm.
and Mark had observed a lot of fish feeding in this marginal shelf. And they were just getting,
Right.
because obviously when the carp just wake up, they chase the sun for starters because they need to get their body up to, they're constantly in this cycle of trying to get their body temperature up to 27 degrees. So they just
Yeah.
chase the sun. When they've been in a winter slumber and conserving their energy, almost on shutdown. As soon as that sun pops out, they chase it, don't they? But all the naturals do as well. So then the naturals are gravitating to the marginal shelf because they need the sun. They like the sun too. And
Hmm.
these fish, this was before lockdown, of course. These fish were like feeding in this marginal shelf, but there's no bait there. We were like, what is that? Like they've only just woken up. So the next day, I won't spoil it. Mark's gone out and had investigated the bottom with his little fishing net, his little pan net,
Yeah.
like a child sort of
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
for for minnows. And yeah, I
Hmm.
won't spoil it, but watch it, mate, because it's what we find in the margin um, is amazing, and it just
Awesome.
rings true in terms of why those fish are there. They know where the caddis are hatching. They know where the caddis are not hatching. They know where the caddis are congregating. They know where the
Hmm.
shrimps are. They just know, and
Yeah,
yeah,
you think it's their life, isn't it? I suppose it's like anything. You know what's good and what works. Like farmers harvesting at certain times of year, they're just the same, aren't they? They
They're
have to.
creatures of habit. They need to survive, don't they?
Yeah,
And if this bait
yeah,
didn't go in, if they didn't weren't attuned to their environment, they wouldn't survive. They know
yeah.
exactly
No,
where the
definitely.
bloodworm are. They know when it needs to be harvested. They know exactly where the
Hmm.
caddis are at certain times of the year. They know where the shrimps are, all the larvae, etc., etc. They are masters of their environment. So yeah, absolutely, mate.
Mm. On that note, obviously you mentioned Bayworks briefly. Obviously, you don't really talk about it on the podcast with Mark, which is nice because you're not sort of forcing it onto anyone. But what's your role with Baitworks? And obviously, you're about to release. Is it creamine? Obviously, I've used some of it, and wow, it smells nice. The missus is going to be happy after lockdown when she gets in the van and she smells that. She's like,
Right?
"Oh, it actually smells
Mate, hopefully
nice."
she's going to be happy just to see you, Dom.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a
You're gonna
while, but I've been dropping shopping off and everything else. But
Yeah,
yeah,
mate, my role. Yeah, so I work for Baitworks. It's one of those roles, I don't shout about it. It's just a job, it's what I do. I've worked for
hmm,
Baitworks now for about 14, 15 months. I've known
Hmm.
Mark, ironically, for trying to think now, over 25 years. So I've
Yeah.
known Mark a long, long time. So I've seen him sort of grow Baitworks from his shed in his mum's garden.
Hmm.
And then, I always admired Baitworks as a brand. It's a family-run business, and I'd worked in the city all my life, and it was busy, 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 and I just had enough, mate. I literally, when things happen in life, you sometimes reflect on what's important, and as I've alluded
Yeah.
to,
Definitely.
I wasn't enjoying my fishing when it was busy, and it was the same with my job. My job was extremely stressful. At times, I was traveling actually around the world. I was working in marketing for big NGO charities. So I was
Right.
surrounded by poverty and sad case studies for charities that basically
Hmm.
needed this content to be able to help their prospective donors give
Hmm.
money. So for the likes of
Yeah.
UNICEF, Oxfam, I'd been to some quite challenging places in the world and seen some horrific things really when it came to poverty. And one thing it definitely does, when you think of where we are right now in lockdown, I
Hmm.
know we're digressing a bit, where we are in lockdown and what you
That's right.
take for granted and what you don't. I mean, crikey, go over to Sierra Leone or go over
Yeah.
to
Oh God.
Cameroon.
When they're lopping off kids' limbs and
Absolutely, Dom.
things.
I'm not gonna
Oh
go into it on a podcast because it
no.
puts life into perspective. We've got
Mm.
Netflix, as Alfie alluded to on his pod. We've got Netflix. You can order pizzas to your door. Most people have got a safe roof over their head. You guerrilla warfare. We are lockdown feels hard because we're not used to it, but yeah, it
Yeah.
still would. For certain other areas of the world, this still would be bliss.
It's what people dream of. Probably, I'd
Yeah,
say
totally.
60% of the population would dream to be in this lockdown right
Yeah,
now with heating, hot water,
absolutely.
food delivered,
And so
any films you
yeah,
want
yeah.
on demand.
Do you know what, Dom? One thing I think we're going to find as well, before I get onto the Paintworks role, sorry, mate, we're digressing.
That's
One
right.
thing I
That's
think
right. No, carry on.
we're gonna get onto when lockdown is over. Do you know what, Dom? Like we're all struggling with it. Make no bones about it. Like we've had our freedom taken away. Our
Yeah.
freedom to a degree has been taken away. But when you think of what lockdown has given us, it's given us more time to spend with your if you're lucky to have to be able to see your children. Or I know some
Yeah.
marriages and some relationships are broken up, and and I understand that full well. And but if you've got your health, you've got your wealth. But
Hmm.
with lockdown, not everyone's going to come through this, but the guys and the girls and everyone else that will get through it. Do you know what? The world it's slowed life's pace down, hasn't it?
Hmm.
Like everyone is frantic,
Absolutely.
everyone is busy, everyone hasn't got time to talk to their friends or their loved ones, or sometimes they don't talk to their families often as they want to. There's many things that people, and me included, I don't get to do because life gets busy. And now
Yeah.
life has literally been slowed down to a reverse pace.
Hmm.
We all, me included, I reflected on this recently. I thought, I wonder after lockdown, we will miss lockdown. I know that sounds strange.
Yeah.
When your life gets busy again and life
Yeah.
gets very stressful and things are difficult because for many reasons after lockdown, I'm sure it's going to be a challenge. I genuinely think
Hmm.
that we'll probably pine for the time when actually life was a slower pace.
Yeah, no, definitely. You're so right. And everything is instant and 100 mile an hour. You want anything, click, it's there within
Yeah,
minutes or hours. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, it's not, you obviously, you said then that our freedom feels like it's been taken away, but it's that labeling thing, isn't it? It's what is freedom? Freedom to you is different from freedom to me, and freedom could be just sitting on the
yeah,
sofa and, like you say, just
yeah.
unwinding because you can for the first time in 15 years.
Yeah, mate, absolutely, and it feels alien to us because this is the first time we've ever had anything like this happen to this generation. Um,
Hmm.
and but yeah, one thing's for sure. As I said, then like some people aren't going to make it through this, Dom, and that's one
Yeah,
thing I'm always aware of. I don't criticize lockdown because I want you want to see everyone be safe. People have I
yeah.
couldn't imagine. I know you obviously with parents and all that. So I lost my mum in February this year, and
Hmm.
when lockdown kicked in, before my mum passed away, I spent sort of every day at the hospice every single day for
Yeah.
3 weeks at a
Yeah.
hospice, sleep
Yeah.
over there at night, go to work the next day. To have
Mhm.
that the last 3 weeks of my mum's life, being able to see her every day and spend that time in a hospice with her, um, and just allowed me to maybe come to terms with what was gonna happen eventually. Now, during that
Yeah.
lockdown period, Dom, when people weren't allowed to go and see their dying relatives, I can't imagine how that would feel for anybody in that
Yeah.
situation, and it's hurtful to think that people have gone through
Mhm.
that process when they weren't allowed to be next to their dying relatives, and I just think, wow, how lockdown is lockdown, like, stay safe, like, there is people that are in far worse positions in the
Yeah.
UK, in Europe, in the world, but for many other reasons as well as just lockdown, so, yeah, I just count my lucky chickens, mate, that,
Yeah,
we're healthy.
absolutely. Yeah.
But, mate, you talk about
Well and truly, exactly. Well, no, just on that note, you sort of hit the nail on the head earlier on. Like health is wealth. That is so true. We can't go fishing. Wow, it's not the end of the world.
no.
If you wake up in the morning, you're winning,
Yeah, you're
and
absolutely
that's
right.
that.
Fishing is always there, Dom, and we can come back to it, can't we? And I know there's
Yeah,
probably a desperation to get out and go fishing right now, and I know full well people are out there fishing and breaking the rules. I know that.
yeah.
But I don't want this to be I don't want this to be a negative podcast. I mean, I know what my morals are, and
Hmm.
yeah, I won't be fishing until I'm allowed to go fishing. It's as simple as that.
No,
But
same.
but
Yeah, same. Not only that, it just feels. Imagine if you had your target fish or the fish of a lifetime during lockdown.
yeah, it's
How's that going to feel?
Yeah, for me personally, as I say, many people, the different people think differently, Dom, don't they? And I don't want to be too
Yeah, just
critical.
going for a
Yeah,
tinkle.
it's
Yeah,
whatever you morally feel is right. That's it. Whatever you morally feel is right for you, then I can't for 1 minute say that that's right or wrong. I just know what's morally right for me. So yeah, I wouldn't like to catch a fish in lockdown. And in fact, I've seen today they've even, some lakes have started spawning, Dom. So that's another thing, that I'm really passionate about. I lakes should close when the carp start spawning, or at least leading up to spawning. Unfortunately for me, some of the lakes that I've got memberships for, they shut for 6 to 8 weeks. So lockdown feels like the old close season if people are old enough to remember that. But even if they're with this lovely weather, they're leading up to spawning, then yeah, just leave them to it, man. That's
yeah.
just give them a rest. That's important. You don't need to. The carp will be there. The carp will be there, and if yeah, just let them do their thing. Let them have a rest, and we'll be back at it before we know it. Hopefully.
Should we bring the close season back?
Oh, mate, that's a good question, isn't it? That's a very good question, Dom. Um, do you know what, mate? It's a real challenging one. We could debate that for another podcast. Business,
Well, not only that as well, you think with the British weather, it would have to be a roll in, wouldn't it? You couldn't say like the old one, it's from March to June,
yeah,
because you think we get the bloody beast from the east in April. You think this time, was it 2 years ago, the beast from the east?
yeah.
It was like minus
Oh,
whatever,
mate,
like
no,
those
they're cold, is
cold
it?
whipping
The
easterlies.
thing that if I can whip it up in a nutshell, mate, the thing that I find challenging with the old close season, like you said, you hit the nail on the head, is that the close season didn't ever coincide with the carp spawning. The closed season
Hmm.
often coincided with nature doing their thing, like birds,
Mm.
etc., etc. But the carp would still be hounded when the closed season was finished because usually around June they like a good spawn. So yeah, I like and I'm all for giving the fish a break. Give them a break, whether it's
Hmm.
a syndicate, a day ticket, or a kind of closed season thing. When they spawn, give them a break and don't fish for them. I mean, I've seen over the years, I suppose, like we all have, mate. I've seen some really bad angling at spawning time. People fishing for spawning carp,
Mm.
knowing full well they're
Yeah.
spawning, and yeah, you do not want to get a big female out, or a big female especially that is laden with eggs out of the water a day or two before they spawn. You don't want to get her out
Mm.
definitely while they're spawning, and equally as important, mate, while they're recovering, you don't want to give them any additional stress by catching them.
No.
So
Yeah.
all of that, if you have any element of conservation sort of morals in you, like we love the carp that we fish for, Dom. Like we want to look after them. We want them to live 30, 40, 50 years. The old fish, that we spoke about there, some like the Marys and the Mary, carp thrive on neglect. Make bones about it. The more they're caught, the harder a life they have. That's definitely going to knock a
Yeah.
few years off them. And I think, when these carp spawn, I can't wax lyrical enough about it. Give them a break. And we're fast approaching that. And do you know what, mate? With lockdown, I bet you any money it probably finishes around the same sort of time with those carp spawning. So
Yeah.
I'm cringing a little bit that, anglers might be allowed out en masse again, mate, just as the carp start getting a bit frisky. So, and I wonder then
Yeah.
if anglers will give them another break. But I don't know. I don't
Mm.
know. But mate, we digress a little bit. Answering your first question, because I know we're knocking on, we're well past the hour. Is that my role at Baitworks, didn't you? So yeah, so I left marketing for the NGOs and the city life for a role at Baitworks. And in a nutshell, mate, I'm the marketing and media manager at Baitworks. So, Baitworks isn't a huge company in terms of headcount.
Yeah.
So yeah, my role is really, really diverse. I do a lot of the
Mhm.
photography, do all the website stuff, so all the socials, so the Facebook, Instagram, catch reports, speak to loads of anglers.
Mhm.
So I manage the guys that help us do our promotion for Baitworks, so the promo team as well. Sort of speak to them, and they help us sort of do a bit of our promotional stuff on social media. And then, of course, I do the videography. I'm make no bones about it. I'm no expert, but I like to make a compelling story with
Mm.
Mark. So I do the videography and the editing. So, and that's just a few of the things, mate. It's just a very diverse role, and because Baitworks
Yeah.
also has a sort of fisheries division, I'm doing fishery management as well. So there's lots of stuff to be
Oh,
doing
nice.
all the time, and it's very
Yeah.
diverse. It's busy, but I'm surrounded by carp of some sort most days.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, and and it just takes this when it's a passion. The stress is obviously your job is still going to be stressful, but it's a lot more manageable, isn't
Oh,
it?
mate, it's manageable. It's a different stress, Dom, because my stress
Hmm.
before was very different to what it is now. It's a different stress. I think
Yeah.
that one thing that anyone that manages any social media will know is that you never turn off, Dom, because social media comes alive
Hmm.
in the hours where
Yeah.
most people are finishing work and
It's,
coming home and having.
yeah.
So my role, I can be really busy during the day, and I could be doubly busy in the night, and I could be doubly busy over the
Hmm.
weekend because want
Yeah. That's what everyone else is free
yeah,
time.
free time. So
Yeah.
you don't really get that normal free time that you would have in a normal job, but because it is a passion and because it's I love my fishing, and there's no better feeling is there than when somebody asks you a question, you try and help them as best you can, and then maybe a week down the line, Dom, they come back and say,
Mm.
"Look what I've caught." It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is everything you want. If you can help somebody catch a carp by trying to give them a bit of advice or trying to point them in the right direction
Yeah.
or give them a few tips on maybe it's the water or bait application, whatever it may be. That's how I get my
Yeah.
kicks these days in my job. It's great to see people coming back and saying a massive grin behind a picture of a carp and saying thank you. And it's just that's just lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, definitely, mate. As well, everyone that I speak to, I've used Baitworks for years as well, like you have.
Yeah.
Everyone says it's a great bait, and it is. If you've got like Simon Scott behind the scenes as well, helping Mark and inputting into it, I know people have used it and come away when it's nothing to do with the bait. They've had a deal from someone. I know that it's a bit of a grey area, but every person I speak to, I say, "I use bait," or say, "Gosh, a decent bait. I love the Atlantic heat." Blah blah. They all know it, and they all know it's a shit hot
Yeah,
bait.
mate.
So that
Do you
must
know
be
what?
a nice feeling for you as
Yeah, and do you
well.
know what? You have to, wherever you work, Dom, you have to believe in what you do, don't you? Like, if
Hmm.
you're a salesperson, you're selling something that breaks next week, then selling it
Yeah.
feels morally wrong, doesn't it? Like,
Hmm.
I could
Yeah.
sell you something that know full well that it's going to break next week, but one thing I don't do at Baitworks, I don't sell anything, Dom. I'm not trying to push anything on people.
Yeah. You don't have to. That's the beauty of it. That's the power of a strong product and a solid brand, isn't
Yeah, and
it?
I like to think that, what Mark's done with the hard work that he's put in, Mark Baitworks has been around now for about 16 years. Is it 15? A long
Hmm.
time, Dom. And like when you're in the carp fishing market, especially the bait world, unless that bait catches carp year in, year out, you ain't gonna last. Like you ain't gonna
Hmm.
last in this market because you're in the game of of people catching. And mate, you know as well as I do, if a lot of anglers, when they look to blame something, they will never blame
Mm.
themselves. That's one.
Mm-hmm.
They'll never blame the conditions. Quite
Mm-hmm.
often, the first thing they're looking to blame is, oh, it must be the rig, or it must be the bait. And it's a fragile market because people are, oh, it must be the bait. I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try something else.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to try something else. And they think there's this holy grail. Nothing could be further from the truth. So many factors are at play why an angler catches a carp or they don't. And
Mm-hmm.
you know as well as I do, Dom, if you've been fishing a long time, the weather, the conditions, the watercraft, how busy the lakes are, etc. You put a bait in front of a carp and they are in that feeding mode and they're hungry
Mm-hmm.
and it's a bait that they want to eat, etc., etc., etc. And you've got a sharp hook and all that sort of stuff. You're going to catch a carp, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. So fortunately, yeah, it's a. I enjoy it, mate. It's a very very busy role, very very, very diverse. And as you say, look at now, it's 8:45 at night, and I'm still talking about carp fishing, Dom.
Yeah. Awesome. I reckon there's a part 2 in this one, mate. I can feel it in me
Mate, I'm
bones.
always willing to do a part two. I've got I hope to get a couple of different stories in, but mate, we run out of time. I
Yeah.
need to go and yeah, probably.
Well, yeah, we'll definitely do another catch story as a part 2, mate, or it'll be a part 3 technically. I think you were my
Yeah,
third guest
yeah. I
ever.
met a long time
I
ago,
checked
wasn't it?
back.
Yeah, but mate, it's great to still
Um,
see that you're doing them, and it's
yeah,
podcast
awesome.
the way forward, aren't they?
I've got to give you a
Oh,
question,
bloody hell, what
and
is it? These questions are weird, aren't they? Go on,
well, this is probably a new level.
go on,
Weird. So this is from Luke Bounds, our last
go on.
guest. If you could trade a hairdo, basically, if there was one hairdo you had to trade with another carp angler, who would it be and
Oh,
why?
right. So if I had to pick somebody else's hairdo,
In the carp angling
oh,
world, like the known, it can't be like your mate down the road. Someone
oh,
we
yeah,
can all relate
I got.
to.
Can I have two?
Yeah, go on, man. I'll
First
let
one
you
that
off.
immediately springs to mind. Now, I don't know this guy, but I admire
Yeah.
not only the carp that he catches because they're my type of carp, really lovely carp, and Elliot Gray
Mm.
tells me that he's a bloody nice bloke and a very good angler. But one thing that
Mm-hmm.
I think he's also got with that accolade is beautiful hair. Is Luke Stevenson.
Oh,
He has
nice.
got
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
biggest permed locks you could ever wish for, isn't he? And mate, that's yeah, I would trade with Luke Stevenson. I think I don't know the guy, but man, his hair is like
Yeah.
off the scale. But another person I'd trade with, Dom, this is why I said I had two, is
Yeah.
our close mate Giles Harris. But
Of
I'd
course.
trade his hair for a different reason because he dyes it every week. So he dyes it every week, and he'll love me saying this because it's a big secret he's kept for a long time. So he dyes it every week, whereas mine's got like this badger fleck. His looks impeccable every week with a lovely
Yeah.
comb over,
Perfect.
dyed on the sides. So just for sheer perfection, and in contrast to Luke's lovely sort of curly lock, I'd go with Giles
Natural.
Harris's perfectly dyed mop.
Wow.
So
And who'd have thought we nearly got through a podcast without you
oh
mentioning
man, I
it?
get him in somewhere, doesn't he? He deserves it. He deserves it. Um, do,
Awesome. Have you got a question we can ask our next
Yeah,
guest,
I
mate?
knew you were going to ask me this, mate. So I had a little sort of rack of my brain earlier on. So my question to the next guest would be, what do they think carp fishing will look like in 20 years' time?
Nice. Let me
Because I
scribble
know
that
we've
down.
spoken about a time when carp fishing was less busy, and obviously it got busier and busier and busier, like I described on Christchurch. So I just wonder, what will carp fishing look like in 20 years' time if they can
Awesome.
predict that?
I love that. Yeah, thank you, mate. One
Go
last
on, mate.
thing. Sketch a carp for me in 60 seconds and do a little video if you can and send me a
Oh
picture.
God. Okay, mate. Yeah, I'll give that.
No pressure, no rush. Out of probably, what am I on now, 30
Right.
people?
Yeah.
I've probably had about 5 come through.
Oh, mate, I'll do that.
So
Yeah.
this century will be
I'll do
fine.
that for you. I'll try and do it over the weekend, mate. All right. I don't want to do
Awesome.
it tonight
Great.
after
Right.
5 otter L's because it'll look like an eel.
Yeah. That might be maybe with that. I can sense a
Oh,
sequel. You've got to draw a carp after 6 beers or something
with your
like that
toe.
with your weaker hand.
With the pen in your mouth.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. All right,
Awesome.
Tom.
Right, Mike. Thank you very much,
No
mate.
worries, buddy. And yeah, we'll speak soon, mate. You look after yourself. Stay safe. And
Thank you.
yeah, hope that we can get through this pretty quickly, mate, and we can see each other out on the bank soon, Dom.
Yeah, Awesome.
Take
Take care,
care,
mate.
buddy. Bye-bye, mate.
Bye.